28.4 FM, connecting India's youth to the world through discourse. We're going to be talking about elections today, and this kicks off our election month focus. So, we're going to be talking squarely and only about elections, both in India and across the world, for the next few weeks. And I'm joined today by both Rishika and Arya in Delhi. What's up, guys? How are you doing?
Hi.
Cozying up. It's getting colder, but I imagine it's much more harsh in Boston. Um, yeah. So why are we talking about elections? So in India right now, it's like festive season. We just had the Shara. There's Eid tomorrow. We're gonna have Diwali soon, so everyone's celebrating. But what India calls its like biggest festival is the festival of democracy, which is elections. And it just so happens that we're witnessing a lot of elections right now. We have the Bihar State Assembly elections happening as we speak. The first phase of polling was yesterday. We have US elections coming up on the 3rd of November. And in general, we're also sort of seeing earlier stalled elections because of COVID-19 get new dates and happen. But that's not the only reason, because not only are we celebrating, democracy, we're also celebrating the fact that Young India Foundation just launched India's first ever election calendar. Um, so the YF election tracker, it's essentially an interactive directory where you view everything that's relevant to elections happening in India. So not only can you view their dates, you can view election catalogs specific to the election where you can see who's contesting, what do they stand for, what's the political narrative surrounding those elections. And it's funny that it's the first of its kind, because not only is India the world's largest democracy, it's also the country where most elections happen. So we'll talk a little bit more about the tracker later on, but it's been out for a few days and it's been getting a healthy response, which I'm just really happy to see. And if you want to check it out, the link will be in our description. But so yeah, the closest election that you can see on the tracker are the Bihar State Assembly elections. So right off the bat, I want to ask you guys, um, in general about elections during COVID-19. So very vague question, and then we can sort of get more specific. Do you think elections should be happening given the risk mass congregations of people poses right now? Arya, what do you think?
So I've heard from many people. In fact, I've heard from my own parents that safety comes first. Why should we bother with elections when we should actually be bothering with healthcare safety of people? Many people are asking these questions, and I believe they are valid questions. People have a
Mm-hmm.
right to be concerned, and people are concerned for their safety amongst everything else.
Mm-hmm.
But elections are such a focal point, such a center of all democracies, that there is no way we can stall them. You see, now this COVID-19 pandemic, we do not have any indication whether it's going to end next year, first half, second half, next to next year. We cannot put off, fingers crossed, it ends next year or as soon as possible. But we cannot put off elections for so long. There are many people in our democracy who need a voice, who need to step up, who are still very dissatisfied with the healthcare services. Now, how do they voice their dissatisfaction? How do they say that I'm
Mm-hmm.
not getting the healthcare I deserve in my constituency? How do they do that? Only through elections. Which is why, and I believe the Election Commission of India has laid down guidelines. We are taking all necessary precautions, all necessary measures. International best practices from South Korea also are being followed.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
amongst all the safety that is being ensured, I believe elections are something which the government officials should strive to make successful, and as citizens, we should all actively try and engage in. So,
Mm-hmm.
I do believe elections are essential.
I do have two responses to that before we hear from Abhishek. The first, with regards to the safety measures you're talking about, it's important to mention that elections that are happening right now, so there's two ways. One is you go to the polling station where, as you mentioned, guidelines are enacted, mandatory to wear masks, sanitizers are available, temperature checks are being conducted, 6 feet mandatory distance, all of that. There's a whole guidelines issued about that, which you can access online. And the second thing is for people who qualify as senior citizens above the age of 80 and people with disabilities, the option of postal ballots have been made available. So booth level officers in the area go to the homes of those people, they give them the ballot, and then a few days later they collect them. So that is an alternative we are carrying out, and especially right now in the Bihar state elections, 12 lakh voters were like eligible for this, and I think around 56,000 have acted on it. So that's a very refreshing development to see. The second thing I do want to mention is, given just like a little bit of context to what's happening. Lots of elections were supposed to happen in India this year, but because of COVID-19, they just didn't happen. There wasn't an official notification saying that they're cancelled. It's just that as and when they were about to happen, a notification came out that they're going to get postponed. So, so for this by-election to the Rajya Sabha, that's something that took place, and as we're seeing, like state legislative assembly elections are happening. But what is also ignored, or not ignored, but also this is not given adequate attention to, and this is something I'd like Abhishek to speak on, is that local level elections that are supposed to happen at the panchayat and in municipal corporations, there hasn't been a lot of news regarding them. It's slowly coming out now, but ones that were supposed to happen throughout the year, say like March to August, we just didn't hear a lot about them. Um, so I guess what I want to ask you guys is, what if we didn't have elections, and not just at the state level, but also in the local levels? Like what, like your parents said, like, so what if we don't have elections? What's the downside of that? So what do you guys think?
If you don't have elections, then what separates you from an authoritarian country? I mean, the one
Mm-hmm.
distinguishing factor about India's democratic setup is that we get to say every 5 years, uh, at the state and at the national level, whether or not we want this government to return to power. And the way we
Mm-hmm.
do that is through elections. It's not through
Mm-hmm.
tweeting, it's not through posting on Facebook, Snapchat, and posting a very angry story on Instagram and then not going to the votes. And so coming back to COVID-19, I think it's a very serious threat. I don't think we're in March 2020 anymore, though. At that point, we didn't
Mm-hmm.
know anything about the virus. We didn't know how it spread. We didn't know how lethal and contagious it was. We didn't know who was the most sort of at risk from this virus. We're now
Mm-hmm.
in almost November 2020. We know a lot more about the virus, who's at risk. And I think that the Election Commission has done a commendable job in laying out guidelines for the Bihar state elections with respect to protecting high risk populations and ensuring that people who are not at high risk can come in person and vote. Because if you can really think about it, if you can go to a grocery store or kirana store, you can go to the polling booth and cast your vote. And
Mm-hmm.
I just don't see that just the costs of canceling elections would at this point outweigh any sort of health benefit, and so for that reason I think elections are vital. Coming to local elections, I think that
Mm-hmm.
they are not given too much attention, because people really don't understand that a lot of the things that directly impact your life, your safety, your health, your roads, the infrastructure directly around you is directly determined by your local election officials. Whether you're living in a rural part of the country, in that case, you depend on the panchayat, and if you're on the cities, then you depend on the on the corporators at the local level. People just don't understand that national elections are very important. State elections are, in my opinion, a little bit more important because they're closer to you. But the most important elections are the local elections. If there's
Mm-hmm.
something broken in your neighborhood, you need to call up your corporator. You don't call up the Prime Minister of India. You don't call up the
Mm-hmm.
Chief Minister of your state. Your corporator is responsible for the smooth functioning of your neighborhood. So if you want a better neighborhood, if you want a better community, and a better
Mm-hmm.
sort of quality of life, I mean, pay attention to your local elections.
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you
And
think happens when these elections don't happen? I mean, you have a corporator whose term just gets extended indefinitely, whether or not you believe he should have the mandate to keep running, in his current position. And
and
we need those
yeah, this is
elections.
exactly, and this is something that Arya and I have had experience with, where a municipal councillor told us that it's not sort of the urban population, the urban middle upper class population isn't that well tuned. Like, you wouldn't really expect them to know who their local councillor is, but people who live in lower income areas, people who come from underprivileged backgrounds, very well do. Not just the names of their councillors, but what they do, how to like contact them. because these immediate problems that we sort of either brush off or think there is no immediate solution to, that is their entire life. So for them, these local level elections are sort of what decide what jobs they're getting and how they're getting from one place to another. Simple things like this. So even if you think about it, when you hear about like people complaining about what's going on in India, of course there's larger level problems that we've touched on, but you hear, oh, there's like so much traffic, or oh, there's like shitty roads and all of that. That comes down to your local level municipal councillor. It comes down to their experience in their job and what they've been doing so far. And not to like shamelessly promote our work, but that's also what the election tracker hopes to do. When you see that, of course, there's a lot of state legislative assembly elections, but there's even more municipal corporation elections and even more panchayat elections happening, and you need to know when they're happening, who is standing for them, who's currently in power. And as you said, um, especially when it comes to COVID-19, especially when it comes to distributing PPE kits or responding to the pandemic in your area, a lot of the work is being done by urban and rural local bodies. One of our candidates from YF has been ensuring that areas in his village, in his ward, are sanitized, that people are maintaining adequate social distancing guidelines. So, when we incorporate international best practices, one thing South Korea very effectively did is made sure that local bodies are empowered to distribute the resources needed to mitigate the pandemic. So, if anything, I would say the lower the level of election, the more they matter, because at the end of the day, India is a federal democracy. Yeah, in general, Bihar elections, I want to talk about those. So elections are happening right now. Public processions are being conducted. People are rallying. It's kind of risky. But do you think, because Bihar is a state that has historically witnessed really low voter turnout rates. Over the last few assembly elections, voter turnout rates averaged at 51%, which means half the eligible voters in the state didn't exercise their franchisee to vote. Um, do you think voter turnout rates in this election are going to be higher or lower? Um, what do you expect?
So I am quite optimistic, Rishika, because I
Mm-hmm.
was just reading up some stats, and in 2015 the turnout was around 54%, and already
Hmm.
in the first phase the voter turnout has been 53%, which is
Hmm.
a marginal difference of 1%, which is
Hmm.
anyways the difference it takes between a couple of years. So I do believe that people are recognizing the importance of elections and the
Hmm.
fact that we need higher voter turnout in general. That's a whole different issue we're not going to explore right now, but that's a big issue. That how can we get Bihar citizens to participate more in the electoral process? But I was very
Hmm.
heartened to see that the difference in voter turnout between 2015 and 2020 COVID-19 was only 1%. So I'm pretty optimistic for the next one or two phases as well. Mm.
Exactly. On one hand, there's the risk of the pandemic that we'd feel would stall voter turnout rates. But on the other, because of the pandemic, there are these higher stakes because it is like a litmus test for the governance uh, that's in the state. And there's also a lot of polarization and lots of issues that are immediately concerning the citizens of Bihar. So, Abhishek, what do you think? What are we going to see with like voter turnout rates, and what do you think is at stake with these elections?
I think that voter turnout will be around the same as it was last time. Um, I think there are new voter registrations because of the influx of migrants from various cities around the country into Bihar as a result of
Mm,
the lockdown in early March, and that may increase the turnout in general a little bit, but overall I think these things tend to be fairly constant if there's if in this case there's a bit of anti-incumbency. I don't know what role that's going to play in turnout, but I
mm,
don't expect it to go up too much.
mm. And sort of narrowing down on what issues are at stake, because I don't think this is exclusive to the Bihar elections. We have other state legislative assembly elections coming up. Um, Obviously, the pandemic is a pervading force. Then there's the migrant labor issue because there's a large population in Bihar, and it has also turned into a sort of policy promise. Some parties have said that if in case of like the death of a migrant laborer, their immediate family will be compensated. They'll be provided better amenities. So that's something that raised concerns. But the Bihar election, I feel, carries with it more controversies than others. You know, we've talked about how the SSR case plays into this because he was from Bihar. There's conversation around women's safety and caste violence, and Bihar is very much a hotbed of caste violence because of landowning issues. Then there's other general factors such as disaster relief um, managed during the Bihar floods that sort of contributes to the anti-incumbency aspect you just mentioned. And in general, Bihar is also seeing what this article described as a sort of downpour of alliances. There are so many alliances. There's so much shifting in between them. So the Bihar election is fairly vibrant in terms of the issues it spans and everything it does. Um, do you think this in any way, or actually, in what way do you think this sort of shifts the national narrative surrounding, like the general political climate of the country? What do the Bihar elections mean for us? Because, I mean, neither of us are in Bihar, but this election has still picked up a lot because of the issues it spans. So what do you think this sort of means in a larger sense? What's the big picture view over here?
So I think it's a good barometer to judge where the anger lies amongst the migrant labor community, and whether that
Mm,
anger, which was very apparent in the early months of the pandemic, is going to translate into them voting against the ruling party, in this case the BJP, and obviously JDU.
mm,
I think that I'm going to use Bihar as a good way to judge what that is, because 32 lakh people have gone back from all over the country. There are, I think,
mm,
between 3 or 4 lakh new voters according to the election commission. That's not a small number. So I think
mm,
we're going to get a good barometer for the amount of anger in that community. One of the bigger issues for that community in general is they've lost their jobs in cities. They've come back here, and they're probably earning a fraction of what they did in those cities in the first place. And that's going to put stress on the local communities because they have to generate that much more employment. Money is not being sent back from migrant laborers in cities to their families back home. So there's a lot of wealth erosion going on in these communities, which
mm,
is very hard to come to terms with, and it's at a scale that is basically unprecedented in like at least in my lifetime. So to see
mm,
to see all those trends coming together, I think we'll get a good idea of how much anger there is, at least against the state government and also the ruling party, uh,
mm,
specifically within some of these communities affected by the pandemic. But I also want to caution people who want to draw too much from one state election and
mm,
projected at the national level. Let me remind you that in 2015, the BJP was comprehensively drubbed in Bihar. They were also comprehensively drubbed in Delhi, and they ended up coming back with a supermajority in Uttar Pradesh, with a majority in Gujarat, and obviously with a majority in 2019. So I do want to sort of put that caveat out there. The Indian voter is sophisticated enough to tell the difference
mm,
between a state election and a national election. So in case
mm.
some of you start throwing parties because BJP loses this election, be mindful of what that really means in the national context.
Don't throw parties, so stay safe. Like, stay at home, even if they
Zoom
win.
parties.
I do think one thing that's sort of important to recognize is that COVID-19 is going to act, as Abhishek put it, a barometer for where people's anger in general also lies. It's like a test for how, it gives legitimate expression to people's concerns with regards to the pandemic. And the thing is, we can't really gauge whether one party is going to be better at mitigating the pandemic than the other, because the pandemic is such a pervading force that all of us are sort of competing with it at the same level. Of course, there's individual policies with how they want to go about it, how they want to compensate people who are suffering from it, and how they want to reduce its effects. But at the end of the day, it's something so uncertain. And I guess we are trying our best with postal ballots for vulnerable communities and polling at with COVID guidelines. But there's also sort of examples to draw from how other countries have managed to hold elections. Because what we saw, elections getting stalled for months on end, is not what a lot of countries saw. And of course, that's owed to their wealth and their ability to, their healthcare infrastructure and all of that. But if you guys have like any examples at the top of your head, Abhishek, about how other countries manage this, do you think there's something we could have done in India? Or even if there isn't, do you think there's something that you found especially like interesting about how countries sort of went ahead with their polling?
So I think that the election commission now has implemented a lot of the guidelines that were used in South Korea, in Israel,
Mm,
in several other countries that managed to hold elections. I know
mm,
in the US, the current issue is, the postal ballots and whether or not they'll
mm,
be received in time, and how they'll be
mm,
counted. And that's a whole that introduces a lot of complexity, at least in the US.
mm,
Um, I don't know how I feel about postal ballots, and especially in the context of India, because it's very hard to sort of assess the authenticity of a postal ballot when you're
mm,
so starved of resources. I mean, the election commission does a fantastic job just to hold the election at a national scale, and even that needs to be done over a 6-week period. I don't think they have the resources to really vet each and every postal ballot. So I'm curious to know what that looks like.
mm,
One of the election commissioners was giving an interview, and this is in the context of overseas voters. So I'm an overseas voter. I don't have a way to vote unless I fly to India and cast a ballot in my constituency. One of
mm,
the questions that was asked of him was, will overseas voters be able to vote remotely, either online or using paper ballots? And stay tuned for online voting, because we have an interesting episode on that coming up.
mm.
Online
Yeah.
voting was laughed at by the election commission. Postal ballots was also sort of scoffed at by the election commission at that point of time, because they made a valid point. They're saying that there's so many overseas voters from India who work with employers in Gulf countries, and don't have, even agency in terms of their free movement from one country to the other, because they have to surrender their passports with their employers and stuff like that. So
Mm,
how will the election commission, know that there hasn't been, an external sort of influence on that person's mind when he was casting a vote? And I think that that's something that I don't think about, because I'm not in that situation, but it's a valid concern.
mm.
So yeah, I
Like
mean,
vote
all of those concerns. Yeah.
manipulation, it's very much a real problem. We see that with EVM, like with real life polling stations. And there's obviously concerns have been raised about whether that problem is consolidated by postal voting. I think that's also one of the key issues that were brought up with the US elections, is when people felt that this won't be a legitimate outcome because of how easy it is to like manipulate votes. But there's also been points raised from the other side. So it is like a very gray area, and it is new for all of us. So I guess we'll see how that plays out. US elections, we'll be covering that soon as well. So we'll definitely look over how this turned out. We'll have like the privilege of hindsight on that. Over
Yes.
here, though, all we can do is sort of anticipate how things go, because it's so new to all of us. It's new to the election commission. It's new to us as well, to you as a voter, and to us as soon to be voters. But it is interesting how much has been played up for the Bihar elections. There is so much to keep track of. When I was preparing the election catalog for these elections, I had like 50 tabs open because there is so much to cover. Um, but I think we've covered a fair bit, as much as we can, in one episode. Just to reiterate, and I have two things to say. The first is, like I said at first, the election calendar is out. The link for that is in the description. You can view elections coming up in your state, but it's also important to be in tune with the entire country's electoral processes. And that's something you will find on the tracker. So even though Arya and I are in Delhi, we still know what's going on in Bihar elections because of the Bihar catalog. And that's something that's going to come up for other elections as well. It's a work in progress. It's constantly being updated because Indian elections are dynamic. The second thing, because we touched on the uncertainty of Bihar elections, is we want to do what we can to sort of see how voter opinions are going to play out, for which Young India Foundation is conducting a Bihar voter pre-survey. The link for that again is in the description. If you're a citizen in Bihar, if you're going to vote, or if you have friends who are going to vote in Bihar, fill the survey. It's going to take you 2 minutes max, not more than that. We just want to see what's at play here because, like we said, a lot of factors come into this. There's so much going on in the news. We just want to see how elections in COVID are happening, and of course that it's going to be like a proper research. We're going to relay it to concerned organizations because elections do matter. And I know there's a risk at hand, but at the end of the day, we cannot compromise on democracy. If anything, it is important now more than ever to carry on these democratic processes. So once again, election tracker and the Bihar election survey, both of them are in the description. Before we close, I want to ask you guys about your media recommendations for this episode. Uh, Whoever wants to go first, do you have any music, book, article, video, movie, what show, anything to recommend to our audience?
So I'll go, Abhishek.
Go for it.
Music and book I've got. I don't
Okay.
want. I've been listening to a lot of Coldplay, and I know that's a redundant suggestion because it's already so famous. So, but do listen to Coldplay if you haven't checked it out. And I've recently been reading Nudge by
It's
Richard Thaler.
fantastic book.
He's the behavioral economist who won the Nobel Prize a few years back for his work
Mm-hmm.
on the nudge theory. An amazing book, a must read. It is a must read, really.
I'll definitely check it out.
Yeah.
Abhishek, do you have anything in mind?
Yeah, so the book I'm reading this week is called The Lost Decade. It's by a journalist for the Business Standard called Pooja Mehra. And if you're someone who's interested in the Indian economy, this is a must read. And while you're reading it, also pick up a book by the former deputy chairman of the Planning Commission. His name is Montek Singh Ahluwalia, and the name of his book is Backstage. uh, Backstage covers the Indian economic reforms journey from 1991 through to 2009, which is 2013 actually, which is when Montek Singh Ahluwalia left government. And it's a fantastic story of someone who is super interested in development and in economic policy making, and how his life trajectory evolved with global events and events in India. That's a good book. Pooja Mehra's book is really good because it's like a damning indictment of both UPA2 and NDA1 in their economic mismanagement, which spanned 2010 to 2008 9 to 2018, which is when the book was published. And I think that it gives you a good fresh perspective on when the wheels started coming off the wagon for the Indian economy.
Hmm. Those both of them sound really interesting. As a non-economics major, I feel that's where these are the kind of like places I do get my knowledge of the economy from. What I am reading, I feel this is not a flex, but it's kind of closely related to what we discussed in the episode today and what we're going to be discussing over the next few weeks. It's this book, How India Became Democratic by Ornit Shani, and pretty self-explanatory. It explains the development of India's electoral processes, how we went from a colonial state to the only country in the world who right away enacted a universal adult franchisee, to like ballots, to EVMs. And it's just kind of makes me emotional to see how committed the Indian imagination was to democracy. So yeah, it's sort of a historical overview based on archives, election commission notifications, all of that about how India became a democracy. Um, I'd recommend it, especially if you find this episode and hopefully if you find our coming episodes particularly engaging. It's really well written, and yeah, check it out. So I guess that closes it for today. Thank you so much to our listeners for joining us. We're so excited to cover elections over the next month or so. And we're so excited about the launch of the election calendar. It's something we've worked on for a long time. And this was something that was supposed to come out earlier this year, but COVID sort of threw that off. But if anything, now when there is so much uncertainty about when elections, especially local elections, are happening, the election calendar is a good way to track that and see what's going on in your constituency and in your state and how you can make an informed choice. So check it out. Let us know what you think. We're always looking for feedback. We're always looking for collaborations. And stay safe. Of course, if you're voting in Bihar, we'd love to hear from you. Do fill our survey, share it. If you like this episode, share the episode. And yeah, I think I've done all the fancy YouTube stuff. Is there anything else to add, or should we close it here? Do you guys want to say anything?
No, close it here.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Bye bye.